A billionaire left his lover for being infertile ... But when he met her again, he was shocked when... The crystal chandeliers of the Warburton Grand Ballroom cast an ethereal glow over the annual charity gala, their light catching on champagne flutes and designer jewels. Michelle Warburton stood near the grand staircase, her emerald silk dress a stark contrast to the usual muted tones favored by Chicago's elite. She noticed the whispers, the sidelong glances, but held her head high. 3 years of marriage to Keith Warburton had taught her to weather such storms. Kimberly Warburton's voice cut through the elegant murmur of the crowd like a blade. "Security," she called, her tone sharp enough to silence the room. "Please escort this person from the premises." Her steel-grey eyes fixed on Michelle with calculated disdain. "We found evidence of theft from the family vault." The accusation hung in the air like suspended glass ready to shatter. Michelle felt the blood drain from her face as 2 security guards approached. "Keith," she whispered, searching for her husband in the crowd. He stood frozen beside his mother, his face a mask of conflicted anguish. "I haven't stolen anything." Michelle's voice trembled but carried across the now silent ballroom. "Kimberly, you know this isn't true." Rain began to pelt against the tall windows, nature's percussion accompanying the unfolding drama. "We have proof," Kimberly announced, producing an envelope with theatrical flourish. "Financial records, security footage. Did you think you could fool a Warburton?" Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the cruel satisfaction in Kimberly's eyes. The room spun as Michelle felt her knees weaken. The morning's visit to the doctor, the news she hadn't yet shared with anyone, not even Keith, made the situation unbearably cruel. "Keith, please," she pleaded, but he remained motionless, trapped in his mother's web of control. As the security guards took her arms, Michelle caught a glimpse of Victoria White, Keith's childhood friend, watching from the shadows with undisguised horror. The room began to blur, faces melting into a kaleidoscope of judgment and pity. Her last sight before consciousness slipped away was Keith taking a half step forward, then retreating as his mother's hand gripped his arm. Michelle collapsed, her fall cushioned by Andrew Stevens, a young doctor who had been watching the scene unfold with growing concern. As he checked her pulse, thunder crashed overhead, and the grand ballroom's lights flickered ominously. "She needs medical attention," he announced firmly, his voice cutting through the startled gasps. "Get them both out," Kimberly commanded, her voice cold as winter. "The party will continue without this unfortunate interruption." As Andrew carried Michelle's unconscious form through the rain to his car, he couldn't know that this moment would alter not just his life, but the fate of 2 powerful families forever. Behind them, the Warburton mansion blazed with light, a beacon of wealth and power built on secrets that were about to unravel. The Warburton estate stood like a crown jewel atop Chicago's most prestigious hill, its limestone walls and manicured gardens a testament to 5 generations of carefully cultivated power. The morning sun caught on leaded glass windows, casting shadows across rooms where decisions affecting thousands of lives were made over coffee served in antique wed cups. Kimberly Warburton's heels clicked against marble floors as she made her morning inspection, each step echoing with the authority she'd spent 30 years perfecting. At 62, she remained, striking, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her posture military straight, her Chanel suit as immaculate as her reputation. Staff members scattered at her approach, knowing her eagle eye missed nothing. The Warburton dynasty wasn't built on mere wealth. It was forged through calculated alliances, strategic marriages, and an ironclad commitment to preserving what Kimberly called the proper order of things. Under her guidance, the family's influence had expanded from real estate into banking, healthcare, and politics. Every governor of Illinois for the past 20 years had sought her blessing before running for office. But lately, hairline cracks had appeared in her carefully constructed empire. Her son Keith, heir to the Warburton legacy, had always been her greatest pride and deepest disappointment. Despite his Harvard education and natural business acumen, he possessed a dangerous weakness: empathy. It was this flaw that had led him to marry beneath his station, bringing shame to the family name. Kimberly paused before the grand fireplace, studying the portrait of her late husband Charles. "You'd be ashamed," she whispered, touching the frame. "Our son, married to a nurse's daughter from Southside Chicago." The very thought made her jaw clench. Charles had understood the importance of maintaining standards, of keeping bloodlines pure. His death 7 years ago had left her alone to guard the family's legacy. In the library, Keith sat behind his father's mahogany desk, tie loosened, shoulders heavy with the weight of expectations. At 35, he looked older than his years, the price of living divided between duty and desire. Reports from the latest board meeting lay unopened before him, his mind elsewhere on Michelle, on the growing distance between them, on his mother's constant disapproval. The Warburton business empire demanded a certain image. Keith had learned this lesson early, watching his father navigate Chicago's elite social circles with practiced charm. But where Charles had found the game invigorating, Keith felt suffocated by it. Each charity gala, each strategic dinner, each carefully orchestrated public appearance felt like another brick in the wall, separating him from authenticity. Family portraits lined the hallway leading to his office, stern-faced men and elegantly posed women, all bearing the Warburton name with pride. Keith often wondered what secrets lay behind their painted smiles. How many had sacrificed love for legacy? How many had chosen duty over happiness? Kimberly's influence permeated every corner of the estate. Her annual garden parties were legendary, gathering Chicago's most powerful families for afternoons of seemingly casual conversation that often resulted in million-dollar deals or political alliances. She wielded social embarrassment like a weapon, her disapproval enough to end careers or shut doors that had seemed permanently open. The staff moved through their duties like well-trained shadows, careful to maintain the illusion of effortless perfection that the Warburton name demanded. Maria, the housekeeper who had served the family for 30 years, alone remembered a different time when young Keith laughed freely, when the halls rang with genuine joy rather than careful orchestration. But the true power of the Warburton dynasty lay in its secrets. Hidden in the estate's vast wine cellar, behind a false wall of vintage Bordeaux, sat a small room filled with files, documentation of favors granted and debts owed, carefully preserved evidence of indiscretions that could destroy dozens of prominent families. Kimberly visited this room weekly, updating her inventory of power with meticulous attention to detail. The pressure to maintain the Warburton legacy had shaped Keith since childhood. Summer camps were chosen not for fun but for networking opportunities. Sports were selected based on their social cash. Even his college roommates had been carefully vetted for their family connections. Love, his mother had taught him, was a luxury the truly powerful couldn't afford. When Keith had first brought Michelle home, Kimberly's reaction had been subtle but devastating. "How?" Quaint, she'd said, examining Michelle's modest engagement ring. "I suppose every generation must have its rebellion." That night, she'd placed a folder on Keith's desk, photographs of Michelle's family, documentation of their financial struggles, hints of past scandals carefully excavated from public records. The Warburton influence extended far beyond their estate's gates. Their charitable foundation controlled millions in grants, their investment firm managed billions in assets, and their real estate holdings included some of Chicago's most prestigious properties. This power had been accumulated through generations of careful planning and ruthless execution. Keith's office window overlooked the rose garden where he'd first kissed Michelle, at a charity event she'd attended as a guest of her hospital's chief of surgery. She'd been different, laughing genuinely at his jokes, challenging his perspectives, seeing past the Warburton name to the man beneath. For a brief moment he believed love might be enough to overcome generations of tradition. But tradition had a way of reasserting itself. The Warburton name carried obligations that couldn't be ignored. Each morning as Keith dressed for work, he felt the weight of his family's expectations settle onto his shoulders like a perfectly tailored straitjacket. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. The Warburton name is not just a privilege, it's a responsibility. The dynasty's influence was both obvious and subtle. It showed in the way doors opened automatically, in the respectful nods from Chicago's elite, in the careful deference of business partners who knew crossing a Warburton meant professional suicide. But it also manifested in the quiet desperation Keith saw in the mirror each morning, in the growing distance between him and Michelle, in the hollowness of his carefully practiced smile. As Kimberly concluded her morning inspection, she paused outside Keith's office. Through the door, she could hear him arguing quietly on the phone something about a development project in the South Side being too aggressive, displacing too many families. Her lips tightened. Compassion was a luxury they couldn't afford, not with their legacy at stake. The Warburton dynasty stood at a crossroads, though only Kimberly seemed to realize it. The old ways of power were changing, and adaptation meant survival. She had plans carefully laid out, meticulously designed to ensure the family's continued dominance. All she needed was for Keith to play his part, to finally embrace his destiny as heir to the Warburton legacy. But as she watched her son through the crack in the door, she saw Charles in his troubled expression, in the way he ran his fingers through his hair when stressed. For a moment, her certainty wavered. Then she straightened her spine, adjusted her pearl necklace, and moved on. Sentiment was for the weak, and the Warburtons had not maintained their position by being weak. Michelle Cooper grew up in a modest two-bedroom apartment on Chicago's South Side, where the sound of elevated trains provided the soundtrack to her childhood dreams. Her mother Sarah, a dedicated nurse at Cook County Hospital, worked double shifts to put food on the table and keep Michelle in school uniforms that never quite matched those of her more affluent classmates. The small apartment above Joe's corner store wasn't much by Warburton standards, but it was filled with the kind of warmth that money couldn't buy. Every Sunday, Sarah would bake chocolate chip cookies in their tiny kitchen, filling the space with the sweetness that drew neighbors from all around. Michelle learned early that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in the strength of community bonds. Her father's absence was a quiet ache that shaped her childhood. James Cooper had abandoned them when Michelle was 5, leaving nothing but a hastily scribbled note and a stack of unpaid bills. Sarah never spoke ill of him, simply telling Michelle, sometimes people aren't strong enough to carry the blessings they're given. This lesson in dignity and resilience would serve Michelle well in her later years. Despite their financial struggles, Sarah insisted on providing Michelle with every educational opportunity possible. She worked extra shifts to pay for piano lessons, tucked away spare dollars for science camp, and spent her rare free evenings helping with homework. Education, she would say, is the one thing nobody can take from you. Michelle excelled in school, earning a scholarship to Northwestern University's nursing program. The campus felt like another world, all Gothic architecture and manicured lawns, so different from her South Side roots. Yet she carried her mother's wisdom with her: be proud of where you come from, but never let it limit where you're going. During her clinical rotations at Chicago Memorial Hospital, Michelle discovered her calling in the pediatric ward. There was something about the resilience of children facing serious illness that spoke to her soul. She worked tirelessly, earning a reputation for being both skilled and compassionate. The children called her Angel Michelle because she always seemed to appear when the night felt darkest. It was during a particularly challenging night shift that she first met Keith Warburton. He had come to visit a friend's child, arriving in an immaculate suit that seemed out of place among the cartoon-decorated walls. Michelle had been singing softly to a feverish toddler, her guards down in the quiet of the night shift. She didn't recognize him then. To her, he was just another worried visitor who looked like he needed a cup of coffee. Their first real conversation happened in the hospital cafeteria at 3 a.m. over coffee that tasted like warm dishwater. Keith was struck by her genuine laugh, the way she spoke about her patients with such care, how she seemed completely unimpressed by his carefully cultivated image. For Michelle, Keith was unlike any man she'd met beneath his polished exterior. She sensed a kindred spirit yearning to break free. Their courtship was a secret at first, stolen moments between her shifts and his meetings. They met in small cafes far from the Gold Coast, walked through quiet parks at sunset, created their own world away from the scrutiny of Chicago's high society. Keith found himself sharing dreams he'd never voiced aloud of breaking free from family expectations, of doing something meaningful with his wealth. Sarah Cooper had reservations when Michelle brought Keith home for dinner. Their small apartment, with its mismatched furniture and family photos in dollar store frames, felt painfully humble. But Keith surprised them both, complimenting Sarah's cooking with genuine enthusiasm and asking thoughtful questions about her nursing career. By dessert, even Sarah had begun to hope that perhaps this Warburton was different. The proposal came on a rainy Tuesday evening in the hospital garden where they'd first shared that terrible coffee. Keith had planned something grander, a rooftop restaurant, a string quartet, but seeing Michelle comfort a crying mother earlier that day had made him realize that grand gestures weren't their style. The ring was his grandmother's, a simple diamond that had somehow escaped Kimberly's vault of family jewels. Their wedding was small, held in the chapel where Michelle had been baptized. Sarah had worried about the cost, but Keith insisted on simplicity. "I want to marry you," he told Michelle, "not put on a show for Chicago society." Only later would Michelle understand the courage it took for him to defy his family's expectations in this way. Life as Mrs. Warburton was an education in contrasts. Michelle continued working at the hospital, despite Kimberly's thinly veiled suggestions that a Warburton wife should focus on charity boards and social events. She learned to navigate the complex waters of high society while maintaining her connections to her South Side community. The children in her ward didn't care about her last name, they just knew she would always have time for one more story. Sarah watched her daughter's marriage with quiet concern. She recognized the subtle signs of Kimberly's disapproval, the helpful suggestions about Michelle's wardrobe, the pointed comments about her background, the way certain social invitations somehow never arrived. But she had raised her daughter to be strong, to stand tall in any storm. Michelle's greatest challenge wasn't the society events or the whispered criticisms, it was maintaining her authentic self in a world that demanded constant performance. She refused to give up her nursing career or her volunteer work at the Southside Community Center. Each time Kimberly suggested it was time to embrace her new position, Michelle thought of her mother working those double shifts, of the strength it took to stay true to oneself. The Warburton mansion never felt like home, despite Michelle's efforts to carve out spaces of warmth within its grand walls. She filled her private sitting room with books and family photos, played jazz music in the kitchen when Kimberly was out, and insisted on baking her mother's chocolate chip cookies herself, rather than leaving it to the staff. As pressure mounted for them to start a family, Michelle felt the weight of expectations grow heavier. She saw how Keith struggled between his love for her and his duty to his family name. Late at night, when the mansion grew quiet, they would talk about their dreams of children who would know both worlds, of using the Warburton wealth to make real change, of building a bridge between the South Side and the Gold Coast. But dreams, Michelle was learning, had a way of crashing against the rocky shores of reality. The whispers grew louder, the scrutiny more intense, and Keith's resolve began to waver under his mother's constant pressure. Michelle watched as the man she loved slowly disappeared behind the mask of the Warburton heir, and she wondered if love alone would be enough to weather the gathering storm. Dr. Andrew Stevens stood at the window of his modest office at Chicago Memorial Hospital, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over the skyline. At 35, he had already earned a reputation as one of Chicago's most promising pediatric surgeons, though his calm demeanor and worn leather messenger bag suggested nothing of his growing acclaim. Behind his quiet confidence lay a story of loss that shaped his every interaction with patients and their families. 10 years earlier, he had lost his wife Claire and their unborn child in a tragic car accident. The experience had transformed him, redirecting his medical focus from prestigious research positions to hands-on pediatric care. His colleagues often wondered why someone of his talent chose to work primarily with underprivileged families, but Andrew found purpose in helping those society often overlooked. Victoria White, now Victoria Warburton, carried herself with the practiced grace of someone born into Chicago's elite. Her marriage to Keith had been arranged through careful manipulation by both families, though she harbored no illusions about its nature. At 32, she maintained an image of perfection: charity board meetings, social events, the right clothes, the right friends, while privately pursuing a law degree through evening classes, a fact known only to her most trusted confidants. The South Side community that had shaped Michelle's early years remained a vital part of her story. Rosa Martinez, who ran the corner grocery store, kept a watchful eye on the neighborhood children, and always seemed to have extra groceries for families struggling to make ends meet. James Thompson, the retired teacher who tutored kids for free in the community center, had been the first to recognize Michelle's potential and encourage her dreams of nursing school. These supporting characters orbited around the central drama of the Warburton dynasty, each playing a crucial role in the unfolding story. Andrew's path crossed with Michelle's frequently at the hospital, where his quiet strength and dedication to his patients earned her respect. He recognized in her the same commitment to healing that had helped him survive his own tragedy. Victoria's relationship with Michelle was complex, evolving from initial coolness to a grudging respect. She saw in Michelle's struggle against Warburton expectations a mirror of her own carefully hidden rebellions. During charity committee meetings, Victoria often found herself defending Michelle's continued work at the hospital, though she took care to make her support appear casual and socially acceptable. The hospital staff formed another layer of support in Michelle's life. Nurse Jenny Rodriguez, who had worked with Michelle since her first day, became a fierce ally, head of pediatrics doctor. Marcus Chen recognized Michelle's gift with difficult cases and often assigned her to the most challenging patients, despite pressure from hospital board members with ties to the Warburton family. Sarah Cooper's circle of friends, mostly fellow nurses and community members, created a network of support that stretched across the South Side. These women had watched Michelle grow up, contributed to her college fund, and celebrated her successes as if she were their own daughter. They viewed her marriage into the Warburton family with mixed emotions: pride in her happiness, worry about the challenges she would face. Andrew's dedication to his patients often brought him into conflict with the hospital's administration. His insistence on providing top-level care, regardless of a family's ability to pay, had earned him both admiration from his peers and concern from the board of directors. He found an ally in Michelle, who shared his belief that medicine should transcend social boundaries. Victoria's carefully constructed facade began to show cracks as she spent more time with Michelle. During quiet moments between charity events, she found herself sharing fragments of her own story: her parents' manipulation of her career choices, the pressure to maintain appearances, the loneliness of a marriage built on social expectations rather than love. The community center where Michelle volunteered became a sanctuary of sorts, a place where social status meant nothing compared to willingness to help. Here, Andrew often provided free medical consultations. Victoria quietly funded educational programs through anonymous donations, and local residents created the kind of support system that money couldn't buy. Rosa Martinez's grocery store served as an unofficial community hub where news was shared, help was offered, and no one went hungry if they couldn't afford to pay. She watched the unfolding drama of Michelle's life with the wisdom of someone who had seen many stories play out in her neighborhood, offering comfort in the form of fresh bread and a listening ear. The hospital staff witnessed the growing tension in Michelle's life as Kimberly's influence began to affect even her professional relationships. Scheduling became more difficult, certain patients were mysteriously transferred to other nurses, and whispered conversations stopped when Michelle entered rooms. Through it all, her colleagues closed ranks around her, covering shifts when needed and defending her abilities to anyone who questioned them. Andrew's past loss gave him a unique perspective on the importance of fighting for what matters. He recognized in Michelle the same determination that had pulled him through his darkest days. Their professional relationship gradually evolved into a friendship built on mutual respect and understanding of life's fragility. Victoria's own struggles with infertility, carefully hidden from Chicago society, created an unexpected bond with Michelle. During their mandatory social interactions, they developed a subtle language of support, communicating through gentle touches and meaningful glances at charity events where every word was potentially scrutinized. The South Side community watched Michelle's integration into Warburton society with a mixture of pride and protective concern. They celebrated her successes while remaining ready to offer support if needed. When Michelle continued to volunteer at community events despite her new status, their respect for her grew even stronger. These interconnected relationships formed a safety net that would prove crucial as events unfolded. Each character brought their own strengths, weaknesses, and complexities to the story, creating a rich tapestry of human connection that transcended social boundaries and expectations. The waiting room at Chicago's most prestigious fertility clinic was designed to project comfort and discretion. Soft beige walls, elegantly understated artwork, and plush chairs arranged for privacy created an atmosphere that seemed to whisper, "Your secrets are safe here." Michelle sat alone, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, watching morning sunlight filter through frosted windows. Dr. Patricia Bennett's office felt more like a living room than a medical consultation space, but the warmth of the decor did nothing to soften the impact of her words. "Mrs. Warburton." She began, her voice practiced in delivering difficult news. The test results indicate some complications with conception. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in the air between them. Michelle listened as medical terms washed over her hormone levels, treatment options, success rates. Her mind kept returning to Keith's face that morning, the hope in his eyes as she left for what they'd told his mother was a routine checkup. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of expectations, 3 years of Kimberly's increasingly pointed comments about the importance of securing the Warburton line. "The condition appears temporary," Dr. Bennett continued, shuffling through papers on her mahogany desk. "With proper treatment, your chances of conception could improve significantly within 6 to 8 months. She looked up, meeting Michelle's gaze with professional compassion. "However, I must be clear, there are no guarantees." The drive back to the Warburton estate felt endless. Chicago's familiar skyline seemed distant and unreal as Michelle rehearsed how to break the news to Keith. She knew that in the Warburton world, 6 months might as well be an eternity. Kimberly's voice echoed in her mind. A Warburton wife has one primary duty: to ensure the continuation of the family line. Keith was waiting in his study, having cleared his morning schedule. The moment he saw Michelle's face, he knew. "What did the doctor say?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Michelle's explanation came out in careful, measured words, emphasizing the temporary nature of the condition, the treatment options, the hope for the future. What neither of them knew was that Kimberly stood outside the study door, her ear pressed against the expensive wood, absorbing every word. Her carefully manicured nails dug into her palms as she listened to her son offer words of comfort and support to his wife. This would not do. This would not do at all. The next morning, Kimberly summoned Keith to her private sitting room. The space was a testament to old-money ancestral portraits, antique furniture, and the subtle scent of roses that had permeated the room for generations. "Darling," she began, her voice honey-coated steel, "we need to discuss the future of this family." Keith recognized his mother's tone. It was the same one she'd used when informing him his childhood dog had been sent to a farm, or when explaining why he couldn't attend his best friend's public school. "Mother," he started, but she raised a hand, silencing him with the gesture that had controlled him since childhood. "The Warburton name," Kimberly continued, rising to stand before the portrait of Keith's grandfather, has survived world wars, economic depressions, and countless social upheavals. Do you know why she didn't wait for an answer? Because each generation understood their duty to the family legacy. The meeting lasted exactly 47 minutes. Keith emerged looking pale, his tie slightly askew, the only visible sign of the emotional warfare that had taken place inside. Kimberly's ultimatum was clear: either Michelle conceived within 3 months, or alternative arrangements would need to be made. That evening, as Michelle worked her hospital shift, unaware of the morning's developments, Keith sat in his father's old leather chair, nursing a glass of scotch. The family portrait on his desk seemed to mock him: his mother's proud smile, his father's stern approval, his own carefully composed expression. The weight of generations pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. Dr. Bennett's office received an unexpected visitor the next day. Kimberly Warburton swept in without an appointment, her Hermes scarf and Chanel suit as much a weapon as her words. The conversation was brief but devastating. Medical records were reviewed, options were discussed, and by the time Kimberly left, Dr. Bennett's hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her phone. A week later, Michelle returned for a follow-up consultation. The office felt different, colder somehow. Dr. Bennett wouldn't quite meet her eyes as she delivered the revised prognosis. "I'm afraid," she said, shuffling papers unnecessarily, "that after reviewing your case more thoroughly, the situation appears more complicated than initially assessed." The new diagnosis landed like a physical blow: permanent infertility, no treatment options, no 6-month window of hope. Just a death sentence for everything Michelle had dreamed of building with Keith. She left the clinic in a daze, not noticing the sympathetic glance from the receptionist who had witnessed too many similar scenes. That night, as she prepared dinner in the Warburton mansion's vast kitchen, despite having a full staff, she still cooked when stressed. Michelle felt the first waves of nausea. She dismissed it as anxiety, focusing instead on how to share this latest news with Keith. The irony of feeling sick while learning she could never carry a child was not lost on her. Kimberly orchestrated the next few weeks with the precision of a military campaign. Casual comments at dinner about genetic legacy. Newspaper articles about surrogate mothers left strategically in Keith's study. Phone calls with board members discussing succession planning, always within Michelle's earshot. Keith tried to shield Michelle from the worst of it, but his protection was as ineffective as tissue paper in a hurricane. The pressure mounted, subtle but relentless, until the very air in the mansion seemed to vibrate with unspoken accusations and expectations. And what no one knew, not Keith, not Kimberly, not even Michelle herself yet, was that Dr. Bennett's revised diagnosis was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. The truth about Michelle's condition, and the life already beginning to grow inside her, would remain hidden until it was almost too late. The night of the Warburton Charity Gala arrived with a fierce autumn storm, rain lashing against the mansion's windows like nature itself protesting what was about to unfold. Michelle stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the emerald silk dress that Keith had given her for their last anniversary. Thunder rumbled in the distance as she touched the small pendant at her throat, a gift from her mother, a reminder of who she was before becoming Mrs. Warburton. Downstairs, the grand ballroom buzzed with Chicago's elite. Kimberly moved through the crowd like a conductor, orchestrating conversations and connections with practiced precision. Her silver hair caught the light from the crystal chandeliers as she paused to whisper something to the security chief, her expression unreadable. Keith watched from the corner, his bow tie feeling more like a noose with each passing minute. The manila envelope in his mother's hand seemed to burn in his peripheral vision, evidence, she claimed, of something that would destroy the family name if not handled appropriately. He took another sip of scotch, feeling the warmth spread through his chest without reaching the cold knot of dread in his stomach. The accusations came like lightning strikes, sharp, brutal, and devastating. Theft from the family vault, embezzlement from the charitable foundation. Fabricated evidence presented with theatrical flourish before the stunned crowd. Michelle's protests drowned out by the growing murmurs of scandal-hungry socialites. Security Kimberly's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Please escort Mrs. Warburton from the premises," the emphasis on Mrs. dripped with disdain. "Her services to this family are no longer required." Michelle searched the crowd for Keith, finding him frozen beside his mother. Their eyes met across the room, hers pleading, his conflicted. For a moment he took a step forward, and hope fluttered in Michelle's chest. Then Kimberly's hand gripped his arm, and he retreated into silence. The rain soaked through Michelle's silk dress as security led her out, her belongings hastily packed in 2 suitcases and a box. 3 years of marriage, of building a life, of believing love could bridge any divide, reduced to what she could carry in her hands. Dr. Andrew Stevens witnessed the scene from the gala's entrance, having arrived late from his hospital shift. Without hesitation, he offered Michelle his coat and car service. "Let me help you," he said simply, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to the chaos behind them. In the following days, Keith's silence spoke volumes. No calls, no messages, no attempt to understand or defend. The South Side community rallied around Michelle Rosa, offering her apartment above the grocery store, James Thompson organizing a collection among the neighbors, Nurse Jenny ensuring her hospital position remained secure despite Warburton influence. Victoria found Michelle at the hospital a week later, slipping past security during a quiet afternoon shift. "I tried to stop her," Victoria whispered, pressing an envelope into Michelle's hand. "But you need to know she's not finished. There's more coming." The envelope contained copies of documents, evidence of Kimberly's manipulation, of threats made to Dr. Bennett, of a carefully orchestrated campaign to remove Michelle from the Warburton family. But it was the last paper that shattered Michelle's world completely. Divorce papers, already bearing Keith's signature. That night, in Rosa's small apartment, Michelle finally allowed herself to break. The sobs came in waves, years of maintaining composure in the face of Kimberly's subtle cruelty finally crashing through her carefully constructed walls. The nausea returned stronger than ever, but she attributed it to stress and heartbreak. Keith spent his evenings in his father's study, drinking expensive scotch and staring at the phone he couldn't bring himself to touch. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "Sometimes sacrifices must be made to protect what generations have built." The family portrait on his desk seemed to judge him, his father's stern expression a reminder of duty and expectations. The divorce proceedings moved with ruthless efficiency, Warburton lawyers ensuring Michelle had no time to mount a proper defense. The settlement offered was insulting, a small monetary sum in exchange for her silence about the family's inner workings. She signed the papers without reading them, her hand steady despite the storm raging in her heart. What no one knew, not even Michelle yet, was that she carried within her the very thing Kimberly had deemed her incapable of providing, an heir to the Warburton name. The twins growing in her womb would remain her secret, a final protection against a family that had proven love meant nothing compared to power. The South Side community watched the destruction of Michelle's marriage with collective anger and determination to protect one of their own. Rosa kept her fed, neighbors took turns ensuring she was never alone, and Dr. Stevens quietly monitored her health, recognizing signs she was too overwhelmed to notice. Victoria's own marriage began to crack under the weight of witnessing Kimberly's machinations. She saw in Michelle's destruction a glimpse of her own possible future, leading her to begin making quiet preparations of her own. Small accounts opened in her maiden name, important documents secured in private locations. The final betrayal came on a quiet Sunday morning. Michelle arrived at the hospital for her shift to find her position had been terminated, Warburton influence reaching even into this last sanctuary. Dr. Stevens immediately offered her a position at his private clinic, but the message was clear: Kimberly's revenge would be thorough and far-reaching. That evening, As Michelle packed the last of her belongings from her hospital locker, she finally felt the first flutter of movement in her womb. Standing alone in the quiet hospital corridor, one hand pressed to her stomach, she made a silent promise to her unborn children: you will never know their cruelty. You will be loved for who you are, not what name you carry. Chicago's winter descended with brutal force, transforming the city into a landscape of steel gray skies and biting winds. Michelle's small apartment in the South Side, secured with Dr. Stevens' help, barely kept out the cold. At 4 months pregnant with twins, she carefully rationed her dwindling savings, taking on night shifts at a small clinic far from Warburton influence. The pregnancy remained her closely guarded secret, shared only with Dr. Stevens, who provided prenatal care after hours at his private clinic. "Your blood pressure concerns me," he would say, his voice gentle but worried. You need rest, proper nutrition, but rest was a luxury Michelle couldn't afford, not with 2 lives depending on her strength. The South Side community rallied around her with quiet determination. Rosa from the grocery store would accidentally pack extra food in her bags. Mrs. Thompson, the retired teacher's wife, insisted on knitting tiny blankets, pretending not to notice when Michelle's eyes filled with tears at the sight. Nurse Jenny helped arrange her clinic schedule around mounting fatigue and morning sickness. Dr. Stevens became a constant presence in her life, his quiet support never demanding anything in return. He understood loss in a way few others could, having survived his own tragedy years before. When Michelle's morning sickness grew severe, he was there with medical expertise and simple human kindness. The hardest part wasn't the physical challenges or even the financial struggles, it was walking past the hospital where she'd built her career, seeing the Warburton name on the building's facade. Each time her hands would instinctively move to protect her growing belly, shielding her unborn children from the weight of their father's legacy. Victoria managed to send occasional messages through carefully chosen intermediaries. Kimberly's influence was growing, her control over Keith becoming absolute. The Warburton empire expanded, fueled by deals that seemed increasingly ruthless. Keith had retreated into himself, becoming the perfect heir his mother had always demanded. The twins made their presence known with increasing intensity. During quiet nights, Michelle would talk to them, promising a life filled with love rather than obligation. "You'll never have to pretend," she whispered. "You'll never have to choose between duty and happiness." As her pregnancy progressed, hiding it became increasingly difficult. Dr. Stevens suggested she take a leave from the clinic, offering to help with expenses. "You're not alone in this," he insisted, but Michelle's pride and determination ran deep. She had survived Kimberly's destruction, she would survive this too. The South Side neighborhood became her fortress. Elderly Mrs. Chen from the laundromat would watch for Warburton cars, warning Michelle to take the back alleys home. Young Marcus from the corner store carried her groceries, refusing any payment. Even the local gang members kept a protective eye on her building. One snowy evening, Michelle collapsed at the clinic. Dr. Stevens found her unconscious, her blood pressure dangerously high. He admitted her to a small private hospital under an assumed name, knowing the Warburtons monitored major medical centers. For 3 days, she fought for her children's lives while he fought to keep her condition secret. The experience changed something in Michelle. She realized that pride couldn't protect her babies, she needed to accept help, to let others share her burden. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. A schedule appeared, ensuring she was never alone. Meals arrived daily. Someone was always available to drive her to appointments. Dr. Stevens converted his clinic's back office into a temporary apartment for her, installing a proper bed and small kitchenette. "Just until the babies come," he insisted. "Doctor's orders." His kindness brought tears to her eyes, not of weakness, but of gratitude for finding friendship in the aftermath of betrayal. As her due date approached, Michelle began preparing for her children's arrival with fierce determination. She worked extra hours when her health permitted, saving every penny. The community organized a secret baby shower, filling her apartment with carefully chosen second-hand furniture and handmade necessities. Victoria managed one last visit, sneaking away during a charity event. Her face paled at the sight of Michelle's pregnancy, understanding instantly why she had chosen silence. "He should know," she whispered, but Michelle's response was firm. "They'll never be pawns in Kimberly's games." The night the twins arrived, Chicago was gripped by its worst blizzard in decades. Dr. Stevens fought through the storm to reach Michelle, who had gone into labor 2 weeks early. The small hospital's backup generators hummed as the city's power flickered and failed. Carl and Oliver Warburton entered the world during that howling storm, their first cries mixing with the wind's fury. Michelle gazed at their tiny faces, perfect miniatures of their fathers, and felt a love so fierce it burned away the last shadows of her past life. The community celebrated their arrival quietly, respecting Michelle's need for privacy. Rosa organized a rotation of meals. Mrs. Thompson appeared with more blankets. Nurse Jenny arranged her schedule to help with night feedings. Even the gruff Mr. Patterson from the hardware store crafted 2 beautiful wooden cribs. Dr. Stevens visited daily, monitoring both mother and babies with professional care and personal concern. He never pushed for more than friendship, understanding that Michelle's heart needed time to heal. His presence became a comfort, a reminder that not all men abandoned their responsibilities. As the twins grew stronger, Michelle began rebuilding her life with renewed purpose. She accepted a position at Dr. Stevens' clinic, working hours that allowed her to be present for her children. The small apartment above the clinic became a home filled with laughter and love, far from the cold grandeur of the Warburton mansion. The secret of the twins' existence remained secure, protected by a community that understood the importance of keeping them safe from Kimberly's influence. Michelle watched her sons grow, seeing Keith in their smiles, but determined they would never know the burden of the Warburton name. 7 years passed like a slow-moving glacier, reshaping the landscape of Keith Warburton's life until he barely recognized himself. The mahogany-paneled office that had once felt like a prison now served as his only sanctuary from the hollow existence he'd chosen. His marriage to Victoria, arranged by Kimberly shortly after Michelle's departure, was a masterpiece of social performance, elegant, appropriate, and utterly devoid of warmth. The discovery came by accident, buried in a stack of papers his father's old lawyer had sent over following the firm's digitization process. Keith had been mechanically sorting through decades of family documents when a single sheet caught his eye, his own adoption papers, yellowed with age but undeniably authentic. The signature at the bottom, his mother's precise handwriting, sent the room spinning. Kimberly's lifelong obsession with bloodlines and legacy suddenly took on a different dimension. Keith sat back in his leather chair, bourbon forgotten as pieces of his past realigned themselves. The pressure to produce an heir, the ruthless dismissal of Michelle, the carefully curated family photographs, all built on a foundation of lies. But it was the second discovery that shattered his world completely. A junior associate at his company's Chicago office had included routine surveillance photos of potential development sites in the South Side. There, in the corner of a snapshot showing a local clinic, stood Michelle, and beside her, 2 young boys whose features mirrored his own childhood photographs. Keith's hands shook as he enlarged the image on his computer screen. The boys appeared to be 6 or 7 years old, their timing aligning perfectly with Michelle's departure. He studied their faces, seeing his own smile, his father's no, his adoptive father's strong jaw, even the slight dimple in their cheeks that he recognized from every forced photo opportunity of his youth. The revelation sent him into a frenzy of investigation. He hired private investigators, careful to keep them separate from Warburton's usual channels. Reports began flowing in Michelle working as a nurse practitioner at a small clinic, raising twin boys Carl and Oliver on her own. The community's protective embrace of her family. The quiet presence of Dr. Andrew Stevens in their lives. Each new piece of information was a knife twisting in Keith's gut. Security footage showed the boys playing in a local park, their laughter silent, but their joy evident. School records indicated they were bright, well-adjusted children. Medical records, obtained through questionably legal means, confirmed what he already knew in his heart: they were his sons. The weight of his cowardice pressed down on him like a physical force. He'd let his mother's manipulation and his own weakness rob him of not just Michelle's love, but the chance to know his children. The bourbon bottles in his office drawer multiplied as he grappled with the magnitude of his failure. Victoria noticed the change in him first: the distant looks, the increased drinking, the nights spent staring at his computer screen. She'd long ago accepted their marriage was one of convenience, but something in Keith's haunted expression worried her. When she finally discovered the truth, her reaction surprised him: not anger, but a quiet understanding. "You have to make this right," she told him one evening, her voice gentle but firm. "Not for yourself, but for them. They deserve to know their father, even if he's 7 years too late." Her words, free from judgment, sparked something in Keith that had been dormant since Michelle's departure: hope. Keith began making regular business trips to Chicago, each time finding excuses to drive past the clinic, the park, the small apartment building where his sons lived. He watched from a distance as they grew, seeing glimpses of the family life he'd sacrificed. The easy affection between Michelle and the boys, the protective presence of Dr. Stevens, the community's embrace of them, it was everything the cold formality of Warburton life was not. The adoption papers became both his torment and his salvation. They proved that Kimberly's obsession with bloodlines was nothing but a carefully constructed facade. The woman who had destroyed his chance at happiness had done so in service of a lie. The irony was bitter enough to drown in. As Keith delved deeper into the past, other truths emerged. His father, the man who had raised him, had left letters expressing regret over letting Kimberly control their son's life. There were records of attempts to contact Michelle after her departure, intercepted and destroyed by his mother's efficient staff. One rainy afternoon, Keith found himself parked outside the boys' school, watching as they ran to Michelle's waiting arms. Their joy was palpable, their love for their mother evident in every gesture. Dr. Stevens arrived moments later, helping with bags and sharing some joke that made them all laugh. The scene was a portrait of everything Keith had thrown away. The final push came from an unexpected source. Victoria, having discovered her own pregnancy was at risk due to complications, confronted him with the harsh truth: "You're becoming your mother, Keith. Watching life happen from behind glass, controlling instead of living. Those boys deserve better than a father who hides in his car." Keith began formulating a plan to approach Michelle, knowing he had no right to expect forgiveness but unable to continue living with the weight of his absence. He gathered evidence of Kimberly's manipulation: the falsified medical reports, the threatened doctors, the orchestrated scandal that had forced Michelle out. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. He, the adopted son, had allowed his mother's obsession with genetic legacy to destroy the very family he'd created. The prestigious Warburton name, which had been wielded like a weapon against Michelle, wasn't even his by birth. Victoria White Warburton spent her evenings in the mansion's vast library, surrounded by leather-bound books and centuries of accumulated wealth, working on her secret law school assignments. Her marriage to Keith had been a masterpiece of social engineering, two prominent families united for mutual benefit, but she had never expected to find an ally in her predecessor's story. The discovery of Keith's adoption papers changed everything. Victoria found them one evening while searching for a misplaced brief. Tucked away in a folder marked Family Miscellaneous, her legal training kicked in immediately, recognizing the implications of what she held in her hands. This wasn't just a document, it was ammunition against Kimberly's carefully constructed dynasty. Her investigation began quietly. Years of navigating Chicago's social circles had taught her the value of discretion. She used her charity work as cover, visiting clinics and community centers in the South Side, gradually piecing together Michelle's story. The truth she uncovered was both heartbreaking and infuriating. The pregnancy complications Victoria experienced gave her unique insight into Kimberly's manipulation. The same doctors who had declared Michelle infertile now attended to Victoria with nervous deference, their eyes darting away when she asked direct questions. One junior physician, after too many glasses of wine at a fundraiser, revealed the pressure Kimberly had exerted 7 years ago. Victoria started keeping detailed records, her legal training making her meticulous in documenting dates, conversations, and inconsistencies. She watched Kimberly orchestrate board meetings and charity events with the same precision she'd used to destroy Michelle's marriage, recognizing the patterns of control that had shaped Keith's entire life. The first contact with Michelle was carefully planned. Victoria arranged to volunteer at the community clinic where Michelle worked, using a different name and letting her dark hair fall forward to avoid recognition. She observed the twins during their visits to their mother, noting their undeniable resemblance to Keith. More importantly, she saw their joy, their confidence, their complete freedom from the suffocating expectations that defined Warburton life. When Victoria finally revealed herself to Michelle, it was in the quiet back office of the clinic after hours. "I'm not here as a Warburton," she said, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm here because what was done to you was wrong, and it's time someone in that family acknowledged it." The alliance between the two women grew slowly, built on shared understanding of Kimberly's manipulation and genuine respect for each other's strength. Victoria shared copies of documents proving the orchestrated nature of Michelle's downfall. Michelle, in turn, helped Victoria understand the community she'd built, so different from the gilded cage of Warburton society. Victoria's pregnancy became increasingly difficult, requiring extended bed rest. During these quiet weeks, she had time to reflect on the parallel paths her life and Michelle's had taken. Both had been pawns in Kimberly's games, but Michelle had found the courage to build something genuine from the ashes of her dreams. The legal skills Victoria had cultivated in secret became crucial. She began building a case, documenting Kimberly's pattern of manipulation and control. Bank records, medical reports, witness statements, each piece carefully gathered and preserved. She knew the truth would eventually come out, and she wanted Michelle and the twins protected when it did. As Victoria's due date approached, she made a decision that would change everything. She revised her will, leaving explicit instructions about her daughter's care and education, determined that Haley would never face the same pressures that had destroyed so many lives. More importantly, she included evidence of Kimberly's manipulations to be revealed if anything happened to her. The birth of Haley brought unexpected complications. Victoria, weak from a difficult delivery, watched Kimberly sweep in to take control of her granddaughter's care arrangements. The same patterns began to emerge: subtle criticism, implied threats, the orchestration of every detail. But this time, Victoria was prepared. She began building a network of allies within the Warburton social circle, other women who had witnessed or experienced Kimberly's manipulation. Carefully worded conversations at charity events, meaningful glances during board meetings, subtle signals of solidarity. Slowly, the facade of Warburton perfection began to show cracks. When Keith discovered the twins' existence, Victoria became his conscience, pushing him to confront the consequences of his choices. "Those boys deserve to know their father," she insisted during their late-night conversations. "And Michelle deserves to know the truth about why you abandoned her." Victoria's own health continued to deteriorate after Haley's birth, but she refused to let Kimberly use it as another tool of control. She arranged for independent medical care, documenting every attempt at interference. Each move was calculated, building a foundation for the day when the truth would finally emerge. The final piece fell into place when Victoria discovered Kimberly's oldest secret: evidence that her position as family matriarch was built on a carefully hidden scandal from decades ago. This revelation gave them the leverage they needed to protect Michelle and the twins from any future attempts at control. Dr. Andrew Stevens stood in the emergency room of his small community clinic, hands steady as he worked to stabilize 7-year-old Carl Warburton's dangerously high fever. The boy's twin brother Oliver watched anxiously from their mother's arms, both of them unaware of the second crisis unfolding outside. Keith Warburton had finally found them. The timing couldn't have been worse. Michelle was exhausted from 3 nights of caring for Carl, her usual composure cracking under the strain. Andrew had been monitoring both boys since their premature birth, knowing their medical history better than anyone. When Carl's fever had spiked dangerously that morning, he'd immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Through the clinic's windows, Andrew could see Keith pacing in the parking lot, his expensive suit out of place in the South Side neighborhood. 7 years of protecting Michelle, and the twins had taught Andrew to recognize threats, and Keith Warburton, despite his obvious distress, represented the biggest threat of all to the family's peace. The past 7 years flashed through Andrew's mind as he worked. He remembered the night the twins were born. During that terrible storm, Michelle's strength and determination, the community coming together to protect them. He thought of countless birthday celebrations, skinned knees bandaged, nightmares soothed, all the moments that had knit them together into something that wasn't quite family but was more than friendship. Carl's fever finally broke around midnight. Andrew watched the boy's breathing ease, color returning to his cheeks. Michelle had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, Oliver curled up in her lap. The scene stirred memories of his own lost family. But the pain was different now, mellowed by time and transformed by the love he'd found in this makeshift family. Keith was still there when Andrew finally stepped outside, looking haggard after hours of waiting. "They're my sons," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. Andrew studied the man who had caused Michelle so much pain, seeing both privilege and desperation in his stance. "They're the children you abandoned," Andrew replied quietly, his calm tone masking the steel beneath, "along with their mother who nearly died bringing them into this world alone." The words hit Keith like physical blows, each one carefully chosen to convey 7 years of absent birthdays, scraped knees, and midnight fevers. What followed was a conversation 7 years in the making. Andrew detailed everything Keith had missed: the twins' premature birth, Michelle's postpartum struggles, the community's rallying support, the countless small moments that make up a life. He spoke of watching the boys grow, of their individual personalities, of the strength their mother had shown in building a life from the ashes of betrayal. "I know about the adoption papers," Andrew revealed, watching Keith's shock. "Victoria shared everything with us. Your mother's manipulation, the false medical reports, all of it." He paused, letting the weight of revelation settle. "The question isn't whether you have a right to know your sons, it's whether you're worthy of them." The medical crisis with Carl had shifted something in the delicate balance of their lives. Andrew recognized that keeping Keith away was no longer an option, but protecting Michelle and the twins remained his priority. He set clear boundaries: any contact would be on Michelle's terms, supervised initially, with the boys' emotional well-being paramount. Over the following weeks, Andrew watched carefully as Keith began tentative steps toward involvement in his sons' lives. He monitored the twins' reactions, ready to intervene at any sign of distress. His medical training had taught him to recognize symptoms, but it was his love for this family that taught him to see the deeper wounds that needed healing. The situation grew more complex when Victoria's health began to deteriorate. Andrew found himself bridging 2 worlds: the small clinic, where he'd built his practice, and the prestigious hospitals where Victoria received treatment. He understood better than most the price of Warburton privilege, having seen its impact from both sides. As trust slowly built between Keith and his sons, Andrew maintained his protective stance while acknowledging the healing he witnessed. The twins' curiosity about their father was natural, their questions honest, and sometimes heartbreaking. He helped Michelle navigate these conversations, offering both medical expertise and emotional support. The greatest challenge came when Kimberly finally discovered the truth. Andrew's clinic became a sanctuary during the storm that followed, his staff trained to recognize potential threats, his security systems upgraded to protect their privacy. He'd learned long ago that healing sometimes required more than medical knowledge. Through it all, Andrew's feelings for Michelle remained carefully contained, professional boundaries maintained even as their emotional connection deepened. He understood that her heart needed time to heal, that trust once broken required more than good intentions to rebuild. The turning point came during a quiet evening at the clinic, after hours when the twins were engrossed in homework in the break room. Michelle turned to Andrew, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she said simply, "for being the constant in our lives when everything else was chaos." The Warburton mansion loomed against the grey Chicago skyline, its windows blazing with light as Kimberly paced her private study. The photographs spread across her antique desk told a story she had spent 7 years preventing twins boys, unmistakably Warburton in appearance, playing in a South Side park. Her carefully manicured nails dug into her palms as she studied their faces, seeing the legacy she had tried to control slipping through her fingers. Find out everything she snapped into her phone, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I want surveillance on that clinic, on their school, on every move they make." Her network of paid informants, cultivated over decades, sprang into action. Within hours, reports began flowing in about Michelle's life, Dr. Stevens' involvement, and the tight-knit community that had embraced them. The Southside community responded to the increased surveillance with a solidarity that surprised even Michelle. Mr. Rodriguez from the bodega started walking the twins to school, his imposing presence deterring the photographers who had suddenly appeared. The local mothers formed an informal network, alerting each other to unfamiliar cars or suspicious visitors. Dr. Stevens enhanced the clinic's security, installing new cameras and implementing strict visitor protocols. He'd seen the damage Kimberly could cause and was determined to protect both his patients and staff. "We're not dealing with just a grandmother wanting to know her grandchildren," he warned his team. "This is about power and control." Michelle felt the pressure mounting daily. Anonymous calls to the clinic questioning her credentials, sudden routine inspections from various regulatory bodies. Even her landlord received inquiries about code violations that didn't exist. But each attempt to destabilize her life met with fierce resistance from unexpected allies. But Victoria, still recovering from complications after Haley's birth, became a silent warrior in the battle. She leaked strategic information about Kimberly's tactics to Michelle's lawyers, her own legal training proving invaluable. "She won't stop," Victoria warned during a clandestine meeting at the clinic. "The twins represent everything she's tried to control." Keith found himself trapped between two worlds. His mother's influence had shaped his entire life, but watching her attempt to destroy his son's happiness sparked something primal in him. During a particularly heated confrontation in his office, he finally stood up to her. "Enough," he declared, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "You destroyed my marriage with lies. You won't destroy my children's lives too." The community's protection of Michelle and the twins took creative forms. When Warburton investigators attempted to access school records, they found the files mysteriously misplaced. Local businesses suddenly developed camera malfunctions whenever Kimberly's people came asking questions. Even the parish priest claimed client privilege when pressed for information about the family. Kimberly's response was calculated and cruel. Anonymous donors withdrew funding from the clinic. Michelle's nursing license faced sudden review. The twins' scholarship applications to various programs were mysteriously declined. Each move was designed to remind them of the Warburton family's reach. But Kimberly hadn't counted on the strength of genuine community bonds. When the clinic faced funding cuts, local businesses organized fundraisers. When Michelle's license was questioned, dozens of patients submitted letters testifying to her care. When the twins lost opportunities, new ones mysteriously appeared through grassroots community programs. The power struggle reached a crescendo when Kimberly attempted to claim grandparental rights through the courts. Her legal team, armed with decades of precedent and seemingly unlimited resources, filed motions painting Michelle as an unfit mother who had denied the twins their rightful heritage. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Dr. Stevens provided years of medical records showing Michelle's dedicated care. Teachers submitted reports of the twins' excellent academic performance and well-adjusted behavior. Neighbors testified about the loving, stable home environment Michelle had created. Victoria's role proved crucial during the legal battles. Her own experiences with Kimberly's manipulation, combined with her legal knowledge, helped build a strong defense. She provided evidence of Kimberly's past attempts to control and manipulate family members, including the truth about Keith's adoption. Keith finally found his voice during the court proceedings. In a moment that would forever change their family dynamic, he testified against his mother, detailing years of manipulation and control. He spoke about the false medical reports that had been used to separate him from Michelle, about the adoption papers that proved Kimberly's obsession with bloodlines was based on lies. The South Side community packed the courtroom during every hearing, their presence a silent testimony to the real meaning of family. They watched as Kimberly's carefully constructed image of aristocratic concern crumbled under cross-examination, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Dr. Stevens stayed by Michelle's side throughout the proceedings, his quiet strength helping her maintain composure as years of pain were dissected in public. The twins, protected from the worst of the legal battle, continued their daily routines surrounded by people determined to shield them from their grandmother's toxic influence. The truth emerged on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Dr. Stevens' office as he reviewed old medical records for the custody case. His eyes caught on a familiar name in a 7-year-old emergency room report: Kimberly Warburton. The date aligned perfectly with a period when Michelle had been working overtime at Chicago Memorial, just weeks before her marriage to Keith began unraveling. The report detailed a serious car accident, with Kimberly requiring immediate blood transfusion. The donor information listed a rare blood type, and only one match had been available that night: a young nurse named Michelle Cooper. Without knowing it, Michelle had saved her future mother-in-law's life, only to have that same woman orchestrate her destruction months later. Meanwhile, Victoria's private investigation into Warburton family history uncovered another shocking connection. Dr. Stevens' late wife Claire had been Kimberly's personal physician before her tragic death. Further digging revealed that Claire had been preparing to expose medical misconduct within the Warburton-controlled hospital board when her fatal accident occurred. The connection spread like a spiderweb through Chicago's medical community. Dr. Bennett, who had delivered the false infertility diagnosis to Michelle, had been a resident under Claire Stevens years ago. But the same pressure tactics Kimberly used to force the diagnosis had been used previously to silence Claire's investigation. Andrew Stevens had never connected these dots until now. His wife's death, Michelle's persecution, the systematic abuse of medical ethics, all traced back to Kimberly's desperate need for control. The revelation shook him to his core, adding a personal dimension to his protection of Michelle and the twins. Victoria's health crisis brought another hidden truth to light. During her extended hospital stay, she discovered records indicating that Kimberly had undergone fertility treatments decades ago. The timing suggested that Keith's adoption hadn't been a choice, it had been a necessity hidden beneath layers of lies about family legacy and bloodlines. The most startling discovery came from an unexpected source. Rosa Martinez, who had helped Michelle during her pregnancy, recognized Keith from an old photograph taken at Chicago Memorial's pediatric ward. 20 years ago, her own son had been treated there, and a young medical resident named Claire Stevens had saved his life. The resident's husband, a promising doctor named Andrew Stevens. These interconnected histories created a complex tapestry of loyalty and betrayal. Dr. Stevens found himself holding pieces of a puzzle that had shaped all their lives: his wife's death, Michelle's exile, Kimberly's ruthless protection of her secrets. Each revelation added depth to his commitment to protecting the family he'd grown to love. Keith, upon learning of Michelle's unknowing role in saving his mother's life, felt the weight of his cowardice even more keenly. The blood that had preserved Kimberly's life had come from the woman she would later destroy, a cruel irony that highlighted the bankruptcy of his mother's values. Victoria used her legal training to document these connections, building a case that revealed Kimberly's pattern of manipulation and retaliation. The evidence suggested that anyone who threatened her control over the Warburton legacy faced systematic destruction, regardless of their actual connection to the family. The community clinic where Michelle worked turned out to be the same one where Claire Stevens had volunteered, treating patients who couldn't afford regular medical care. The parallel between these two women, both targeted by Kimberly for choosing compassion over status, was striking. Dr. Stevens found himself revisiting memories of his life with Claire, seeing now how her death connected to the larger pattern of Kimberly's influence. The accident that claimed her life had occurred shortly after she'd begun questioning hospital practices, particularly those involving Warburton-funded research. Michelle struggled to process the revelation that she had saved Kimberly's life. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her rare blood type, which had made her the only available donor that night, had literally kept alive the woman who would later deem her unworthy of the Warburton name. The twins, though protected from most of these revelations, sensed the shifting dynamics around them. They noticed Dr. Stevens' increased protectiveness, the way their mother's hands trembled when discussing certain topics, the new security measures at the clinic. Their instinctive trust in him made more sense now, as if they somehow recognized his connection to their story. Victoria's documentation of these connections became crucial evidence in the ongoing custody battle. Each revealed link demonstrated Kimberly's willingness to destroy lives to maintain her illusion of control, making her claims of acting in the twins' best interest ring hollow. The truth about Claire Stevens' death cast a new light on Andrew's dedication to Michelle and the twins. His protection of them wasn't just professional or even personal, it was a continuation of his wife's fight against the corruption she'd died trying to expose. The Chicago Tribune's headline blared across breakfast tables throughout the city. Warburton family scandal, hidden heirs, and medical misconduct. The story, carefully crafted from leaked documents and anonymous sources, sent shockwaves through the city's elite social circles. Kimberly Warburton's perfectly constructed facade began to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. The media circus descended on the Southside clinic with predatory enthusiasm. Reporters camped outside, hoping to catch glimpses of the twins who were now being called the lost Warburton heirs. Michelle found herself navigating through back alleys and service entrances just to get her children to school, the constant flash of cameras turning their daily routine into an obstacle course. Inside the Warburton mansion, the tension was palpable. Keith watched his mother's increasingly erratic behavior with growing concern. Her usual calculating demeanor gave way to sudden outbursts of rage, followed by periods of eerie calm. The staff walked on eggshells, while Victoria documented every incident, building a case for what she feared might come next. The legal battles intensified as Kimberly's team launched a multi-pronged attack. They questioned Michelle's fitness as a mother, citing her unstable employment history after leaving the Warburtons. They challenged Dr. Stevens' medical credentials, attempting to discredit the clinic's records. They even tried to paint the Southside community's protective network as suspicious organized activity. The twins, despite everyone's best efforts to shield them, began showing signs of stress. Carl grew quiet and withdrawn, while Oliver developed anxiety about going to school. Their teachers reported changes in behavior, dropped grades, decreased participation, the invisible weight of adult conflicts settling onto young shoulders. Dr. Stevens watched helplessly as media attention began affecting his clinic's other patients. Some stopped coming, fearful of the cameras and reporters. Others faced harassment from investigators seeking information about Michelle and the twins. The community healthcare system he'd built so carefully began showing signs of strain. Victoria's health deteriorated under the stress, her pregnancy complications worsening as she tried to balance her own medical needs with protecting Michelle and the twins. Keith found himself torn between supporting his wife and protecting his sons, while trying to manage the growing crisis within his family's empire. The business impact of the scandal hit the Warburton enterprises hard. Stock prices fluctuated as investors questioned the stability of a family empire built on secrets. Board members began distancing themselves, corporate partners requested emergency meetings, and decades-old alliances showed signs of fraying. Michelle faced her own professional crisis as the medical board, under pressure from unnamed sources, launched an investigation into her practice. Every decision she'd made at the clinic came under scrutiny, every patient file examined for possible mistakes. The stress began affecting her health, though she fought to hide it from her sons. The community rallied around them with fierce determination. Local businesses refused to speak to reporters about the family. Neighbors formed human barriers when camera crews got too aggressive. The parish church offered its basement as a safe route for the twins to attend school, creating a tunnel of sanctuary through the media storm. Keith finally reached his breaking point during a board meeting when Kimberly suggested using corporate resources to handle the situation. The implied threat to Michelle and the twins sparked something primal in him. His public confrontation with his mother, captured by dozens of smartphones, became instant social media fodder. Dr. Stevens increased security at the clinic, installing panic buttons and hiring additional staff. But the real protection came from unexpected sources: former patients volunteering as security, local youth running interference with photographers, even competing hospitals offering support and resources. The twins' school became another battleground as Kimberly's lawyers demanded access to their records, citing grandparental rights. The principal, a veteran educator who'd seen her share of custody battles, stood firm. "These children's well-being comes first," she declared to the press. "This isn't about family names or inheritances. It's about protecting two young boys." Victoria's private investigators uncovered disturbing patterns in Kimberly's past: other families torn apart, careers destroyed, lives derailed. Each revelation added to the growing case against her, but also increased the danger. A desperate Kimberly was proving to be more dangerous than a calculating one. The pressure began taking its toll on everyone. Michelle lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Keith's drinking increased. Victoria's doctors ordered complete bed rest. Dr. Stevens worked around the clock, trying to keep his clinic functioning while protecting his extended family. The final confrontation began on a cold Chicago morning, when Kimberly Warburton swept into Dr. Stevens' clinic unannounced, flanked by two attorneys and a private security team. The waiting room fell silent, patients pressing themselves against walls as the Warburton matriarch moved through the space like an advancing storm. Michelle was reviewing patient files when her office door burst open. She looked up to find Kimberly standing there, elegant as ever in Chanel, but with something wild in her eyes that sent chills down Michelle's spine. "Where are my grandsons?" Kimberly demanded, her voice cutting through the quiet of the medical office. Dr. Stevens appeared in the doorway, his presence calm but authoritative. "Mrs. Warburton, this is a private medical facility. You need to leave." His hand was already reaching for the panic button installed under the desk, but Kimberly's next move caught everyone by surprise. She pulled out a thick folder and slammed it on Michelle's desk. "I own this building," she announced. "As of this morning, I own the entire block. This clinic is being shut down for code violations. You have 1 hour to evacuate." The lawyers behind her nodded in confirmation, holding up official-looking documents. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Within minutes, people began gathering outside the clinic: patients, neighbors, local business owners. They formed a human chain around the building, their message clear: this clinic wasn't going anywhere. Keith arrived just as the police pulled up. Having been alerted by Victoria's network of informants, he found himself facing a choice that had been 7 years in the making. His mother stood on one side, representing power, privilege, and control. On the other stood Michelle, their sons, and a community united in protection of its own. Enough, Keith's voice carried across the crowd with unexpected authority. "Mother, this ends now." He held up his phone, displaying an email that had just been sent to every major news outlet in Chicago. Victoria found the evidence about Claire Stevens' death. It's all coming out, everything. Kimberly's face went pale. For the first time, her perfect composure cracked completely. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "I did everything to protect this family's legacy, your legacy, your legacy," but Keith wasn't finished. He pulled out another set of documents, his own adoption papers. "What legacy, Mother? The one you built on lies? On destroying anyone who threatened your control?" Keith moved to stand beside Michelle, his decision finally clear. "These people, this community, they understand more about legacy than you ever will." Dr. Stevens watched the scene unfold, positioned protectively near Michelle. He saw the moment Kimberly realized she had lost not just this battle, but everything she had spent decades building. Her carefully constructed world of power and influence was crumbling in front of a small community clinic. The twins, who had been safely hidden in the clinic's basement during the confrontation, chose that moment to appear. They pushed through the crowd to stand beside their mother, their presence a stark reminder of what this fight was really about. Carl and Oliver, mirror images of their father, faced their grandmother for the first time. Kimberly stared at her grandsons, seeing in their faces the perfect blend of Warburton features she had spent years pretending didn't exist. For a moment something flickered in her eyes, regret, perhaps, or recognition of what she had thrown away. But it was too late. Victoria appeared at the clinic's entrance, moving slowly due to her pregnancy complications but determined to be present. She held another folder, the final piece of evidence that would ensure Kimberly could never threaten this family again. "It's over," she said simply. "The board has voted. You're done." The community watched in silent solidarity as Kimberly's lawyers reviewed the new documents. The private security team stepped back, recognizing that the power dynamics had shifted. The police, reading the situation, moved to ensure the crowd remained peaceful rather than intervening on Kimberly's behalf. Michelle stood her ground through it all, one hand on each of her son's shoulders. She looked at Keith, seeing in his face the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had been buried under years of his mother's control. Their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. Some bridges could be rebuilt, even after years of burning. In the aftermath of the clinic confrontation, Victoria's carefully gathered evidence began to unravel decades of Warburton secrets. The boardroom of Warburton Enterprises fell silent as she presented her findings, each document projected onto the wall like scenes from a carefully hidden horror story. First came the medical records proving Kimberly's own infertility, the true reason for Keith's adoption. Years of treatments at private clinics across Europe, all carefully concealed beneath layers of financial obscurity. The savage irony of her persecution of Michelle for a condition she herself had faced struck the board members into stunned silence. Then came the evidence about Claire Stevens' death. What had appeared to be a tragic accident was revealed as something far more sinister. Emails, phone records, and surveillance footage painted a picture of orchestrated harassment leading up to the fatal crash. Claire had been preparing to expose systematic medical fraud in Warburton-controlled hospitals, targeting vulnerable patients for unnecessary procedures. The revelation that shook Keith to his core came next. His father, Charles Warburton, had left a series of letters with his private attorney to be delivered upon specific triggers. One such trigger had been Keith's marriage to Michelle. The letters revealed Charles' own struggles against Kimberly's manipulation, his regret at not protecting his son, and his secret efforts to create a trust fund for Michelle and any future children. Victoria's investigation had uncovered a pattern spanning decades. Young doctors who questioned procedures disappeared from their positions. Nurses who spoke up found their licenses challenged. Administrators who resisted were buried in legal troubles. Each incident traced back to Kimberly's obsession with maintaining control over the Warburton medical empire. The most damning evidence concerned Michelle's original expulsion from the family. Medical records had been falsified, test results altered, and doctors coerced into providing false testimony. The elaborate scheme had been designed not just to separate Keith from Michelle, but to ensure she would never have the resources to fight back. In her hospital room, Victoria shared another discovery with Michelle, evidence that Kimberly had been monitoring her pregnancy from the beginning. The random medical complications, the sudden staff changes, the emergency procedures that always seemed to require her to be sedated, all had been part of Kimberly's attempt to control every aspect of the next Warburton generation. Dr. Stevens found his own painful closure in the revelations. Claire's research notes, preserved by a loyal nurse, detailed the systematic abuse she had uncovered. Patient records showed unnecessary procedures, experimental treatments disguised as standard care, and a pattern of targeting those least able to defend themselves. The twins, protected from the worst of the revelations, still sensed the seismic shifts in their world. They watched their father struggle with the truth about his adoption, their mother process years of orchestrated persecution, and their community celebrate the exposure of long-buried wrongs. Keith's public acknowledgement of the truth became a turning point for the Warburton Empire. Standing before the board, he detailed his own complicity in his mother's schemes, his failure to protect Michelle, and his commitment to rebuilding both his family's legacy and his relationships with his sons. Corporate partners who had long suspected something was amiss in the Warburton medical facilities began their own investigations. Whistleblowers, emboldened by the revelations, came forward with new evidence. The carefully constructed facade of Warburton philanthropy crumbled, revealing the rot at its core. The Southside community watched the unfolding scandal with a mixture of vindication and concern. They had protected their own, standing against power and privilege, but the revelations threatened the stability of institutions many relied upon for healthcare and employment. Michelle found herself at the center of a media storm, her story becoming a symbol of resilience against corporate corruption. She handled the attention with characteristic grace, redirecting focus to the broader issues of medical ethics and community healthcare that had been at the heart of Claire Stevens' original investigation. The final revelation came from an unexpected source. Rosa Martinez, who had helped hide Michelle during her pregnancy, produced a letter Claire Stevens had left with her for safekeeping. The letter detailed not just the medical fraud, but Kimberly's personal involvement in covering up patient deaths, including several children from prominent families who had questioned her authority. The crisis erupted with frightening suddenness. One moment Carl and Oliver were walking home from school with their usual escort of community volunteers. The next, two black SUVs squealed to a halt beside them. The kidnapping attempt was as professional as it was brazen men in dark suits moving with military precision toward the twins. What Kimberly's hired men hadn't counted on was the fierce loyalty of the Southside community. Mr. Rodriguez from the bodega moved first, his bulk creating a barrier between the men and the boys. Teenagers from the basketball court across the street immediately began streaming toward the scene. Shop owners emerged from their stores, phones already recording. The twins, drilled for months on emergency procedures, ran for the nearest safe house, Rosa's grocery store. The community's response was instantaneous and coordinated. Cars mysteriously blocked the SUV's escape routes. Construction materials appeared in the street. A crowd materialized, phones live streaming every moment. Michelle received the alert while at the clinic, the coded message sending ice through her veins, eagles in flight. Nest-compromised Dr. Stevens immediately implemented their crisis protocol, while alerting their network of allies. Within minutes, police sirens were converging on the scene from multiple directions. Keith, in the middle of a board meeting when the news reached him, felt something snap inside. The careful balance he'd been trying to maintain between his mother's world and his children's safety shattered. He arrived at the scene to find a standoff Kimberly's men trapped by the community's response, the twins safely hidden, and a media circus already forming. Victoria, despite her precarious health, became the calm center of the storm. From her hospital bed, she coordinated with lawyers, police, and media contacts. Her years of quiet preparation for just such a crisis proved invaluable as she methodically dismantled Kimberly's remaining power structure. The attempted kidnapping pushed Michelle past her breaking point. The strain of years of vigilance, of protecting her children while trying to maintain normalcy, finally took its toll. She collapsed at the clinic, her body surrendering to exhaustion and stress. Dr. Stevens found her unconscious in her office, clutching a photo of the twins. The community's response to Michelle's hospitalization was immediate and overwhelming. A roster was created for round-the-clock protection at the hospital. Local families took turns caring for the twins. The clinic's other doctors and nurses covered her patients, ensuring continuity of care for the community she'd served so faithfully. Keith, watching his sons huddle together in Rosa's back room while police interviewed witnesses, finally confronted the full horror of what his mother had become. The carefully constructed justifications for years of compliance with her demands crumbled in the face of her willingness to traumatize innocent children, his children. Dr. Stevens stayed by Michelle's bedside through the crisis, his medical expertise warring with his emotional investment. He monitored her vital signs while coordinating with the hospital security team, knowing Kimberly might attempt to use Michelle's vulnerability to gain access to the twins. The attempted kidnapping became a rallying point for those who had suffered under Warburton influence. Former employees came forward with new evidence. Patients shared stories of coercion and corruption. The carefully maintained veneer of respectability surrounding the Warburton empire cracked completely. Victoria's condition deteriorated under the stress, forcing her doctors to consider early delivery of her baby. The crisis had pushed her body to its limits, but she refused to stop coordinating the legal and media response to the kidnapping attempt. Her hospital room became a command center, with lawyers and journalists cycling through under careful security. The twins, though physically unharmed, showed signs of emotional trauma. Carl became hypervigilant, startling at sudden noises. Oliver developed separation anxiety, refusing to leave his brother's side. Their resilience was tested in ways no children should face, their innocence tainted by adult conflicts. Keith found himself making decisions he should have made years ago. He initiated emergency board measures to strip his mother of all corporate authority. He filed for restraining orders protecting not just his sons, but the entire community that had protected them. He publicly acknowledged his own culpability in enabling her behavior. The crisis reached its peak when Michelle regained consciousness to find both Kimberly and Keith in her hospital room. The ensuing confrontation, witnessed by Dr. Stevens and hospital security, became the final breaking point for the Warburton dynasty. Words that had festered for years finally found voice, truths too long hidden were exposed, and the true cost of power without compassion was laid bare. Victoria's decline was swift and merciless. The complications from her pregnancy, exacerbated by the stress of protecting Michelle and the twins, finally overwhelmed her fragile system. The private room at Chicago Memorial Hospital became her world, machines monitoring every flutter of her heart, every breath she struggled to take. Keith found himself torn between his dying wife and his newly acknowledged sons. Victoria, ever practical even in her final days, made the decision for him. "They need you more," she whispered during one of her lucid moments. "I've made my peace. Go be the father they deserve." Her words carried the weight of absolution and responsibility. The news of Victoria's terminal diagnosis hit Michelle harder than anyone expected. Despite their complicated history, the two women had forged a bond through their shared struggle against Kimberly's manipulation. Michelle spent hours at Victoria's bedside, their conversations ranging from legal strategies to hopes for their children's futures. Hayley, barely old enough to understand what was happening, became the center of Victoria's remaining energy. She insisted on documenting everything: video messages for future birthdays, letters to be opened at life's milestones, detailed instructions for her care. Each recording left her exhausted but determined. Dr. Stevens watched the decline with professional detachment, masking personal anguish. The parallels to Claire's death were impossible to ignore: another bright light being extinguished too soon, another family being torn apart by tragedy. He threw himself into managing Victoria's care, though he knew the outcome was inevitable. Kimberly's downfall came not through legal prosecution or public scandal, but through complete isolation. Her power base eroded as allies distanced themselves. Board members resigned rather than face investigation. Social connections withered as the true extent of her manipulation became known. The grande dame of Chicago society found herself alone in her mansion, surrounded by wealth but devoid of human connection. The Warburton empire, built over generations, began to crumble. Share prices plummeted as investigations revealed the depth of corruption. Hospitals under Warburton control faced federal scrutiny. Charitable foundations scrambled to distance themselves from the family name. The wealth that had seemed endless began to evaporate. Keith watched his mother's isolation with a mixture of pity and relief. The woman who had controlled his every move since childhood now seemed diminished, her carefully maintained facade cracking to reveal the frightened, controlling person beneath. Her attempts to reach out to him were met with silence. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. Victoria's final weeks were a masterclass in dignity and preparation. She worked with lawyers to ensure Hayley's future security, collaborated with Michelle on educational plans for all 3 children, and documented everything she knew about Kimberly's remaining schemes. Her strength, even as her body failed, inspired everyone around her. The twins, sensing the gravity of the situation, began spending time with their half-sister. They shared stories about their different lives, found common ground in their experiences with Kimberly, and formed a tentative sibling bond that Victoria watched with quiet satisfaction. Her daughter would not be alone. Michelle's clinic faced its own crisis as funding dried up. Many donors, fearful of association with the Warburton scandal, withdrew their support. The community rallied once again, organizing fundraisers and volunteering services, but the financial strain began to show in equipment shortages and delayed maintenance. Dr. Stevens found himself reliving Claire's death through Victoria's decline. The similarities were haunting. Both women had fought against corruption, both had prioritized truth over personal safety, both had left behind children who would never fully know them. The weight of these parallels nearly broke him. Keith's drinking worsened as he tried to cope with Victoria's impending death and his role in years of enabling his mother's behavior. His attempts to connect with his sons were hampered by his own guilt and grief. Only Michelle's steady presence kept him from completely unraveling. The final blow came with Victoria's last act of defiance against Kimberly. She had arranged for a complete expose to be published after her death, detailing everything from Keith's adoption to Claire's murder. The manuscript, delivered to major newspapers and law enforcement agencies, ensured that Kimberly's remaining power would be completely destroyed. Victoria passed away on a quiet Sunday morning, Hayley curled against her side, Keith holding her hand, and Michelle keeping vigil nearby. Her legacy would live on not just in the justice she helped achieve, but in the families she helped protect and unite. The aftermath of Victoria's death created ripples of emotional turmoil that touched everyone connected to the Warburton saga. Carl and Olive, already struggling with their identity as Warburton heirs, now faced the additional complexity of being Hayley's protectors. The older twin, Carl, took this responsibility with almost painful seriousness, watching over his half-sister with an intensity that worried both Michelle and Dr. Stevens. Oliver's response manifested differently. His usual confidence faltered, replaced by a quieter, more anxious personality. He began having nightmares about the kidnapping attempt, waking up screaming about men in dark suits coming to take them away. School became a daily challenge, his grades slipping as he struggled to concentrate amid constant fears about his family's safety. Michelle watched her son's struggles with growing concern. The confident, happy boys who had thrived in their close-knit community were changing, the weight of their heritage pressing down on young shoulders never meant to bear such burdens. Even their relationship with each other showed strain, the twins' legendary closeness tested by their different ways of processing trauma. Keith's attempts to connect with his sons became increasingly strained. His guilt over years of absence mixed toxically with his grief over Victoria, making him alternately overly indulgent and emotionally distant. The boys sensed his instability, their responses varying from protective wariness to testing boundaries, neither reaction helping to bridge the gap years of absence had created. Hayley, at just 4 years old, processed her mother's death with the brutal simplicity of early childhood. Her questions were devastating in their directness. Why did Mummy leave? Is grandmother going to take me away too? Do you promise not to die? Each inquiry left Keith struggling for answers that wouldn't add to her trauma. Dr. Stevens found himself in an increasingly complex role. His medical expertise was needed to help the children process their trauma, but his personal involvement with the family made maintaining professional distance impossible. He watched Michelle struggle to balance everyone's emotional needs while neglecting her own, his concern for her growing daily. The community that had so fiercely protected Michelle and the twins now faced its own challenges. The clinic's financial struggles affected many who relied on its services. Long-time patients worried about its future, their anxiety adding to the general atmosphere of uncertainty. The neighborhood that had been a sanctuary began to feel the strain of ongoing crisis. Michelle's own emotional reserves began to show dangerous signs of depletion. Years of maintaining strength for her children, months of constant vigilance against Kimberly's threats, and now the added responsibility of helping Hayley adjust to life without her mother. It all took a toll that became increasingly difficult to hide. Keith's drinking, which had worsened during Victoria's illness, became a source of tension between him and Michelle. She recognized the pain driving him to seek escape, but couldn't risk exposing their children to another form of instability. Their arguments, though quiet and contained, added another layer of stress to an already fragile situation. The twins' struggle with their Warburton identity reached a crisis point when Carl got into a fight at school defending Hayley from gossip about their grandmother. The incident forced everyone to confront the reality that the children couldn't be fully shielded from the public fallout of their family's drama. Dr. Stevens initiated regular therapy sessions for all 3 children, creating a safe space for them to process their complex emotions. During these sessions, patterns emerged that worried him deeply. The twins showed signs of post-traumatic stress, while Hayley exhibited attachment issues that would require long-term intervention. Michelle found herself dealing with unexpected jealousy when the twins began seeking comfort from their father, even as she recognized the importance of encouraging their relationship with Keith. The emotion shamed her, adding to her growing sense of being overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. Keith's attempts to replace alcohol with more positive coping mechanisms met with mixed success. He joined a grief support group, started therapy, and tried to establish routines with his children, but his progress was inconsistent. Every setback with the twins sent him spiraling into guilt, making it harder to maintain his recovery. The emotional complexity of their situation reached a breaking point when Hayley called Michelle Mummy during a particularly difficult night. The moment crystallized the impossible balance they were all trying to maintain, honoring Victoria's memory while building new family bonds, acknowledging past hurts while moving forward, protecting the children while helping them process their pain. The collapse of the Warburton Empire sent shockwaves through Chicago's business community. Decades of carefully hidden corruption came to light as federal investigators combed through records, revealing a pattern of fraud that stretched back generations. Stock prices plummeted, partnerships dissolved, and the family's once untouchable reputation lay in ruins. The media frenzy intensified when several high-profile patient deaths were linked to experimental procedures at Warburton-controlled hospitals. Former employees came forward with stories of covered-up malpractice, falsified research data, and systematic intimidation of whistleblowers. Each revelation added to the growing scandal, dragging more prominent names into the mess. Keith found himself fighting battles on multiple fronts. The board demanded his resignation, holding him partially responsible for failing to recognize the corruption during his tenure. Shareholders filed lawsuits. Former business partners distanced themselves. The Warburton name, once a golden key to Chicago's elite circles, became a liability. The family's financial crisis hit hard and fast. Assets were frozen pending investigation. Credit lines were suspended. The magnificent Warburton mansion, symbol of generations of power and privilege, went into foreclosure. Keith watched helplessly as his children's inheritance evaporated, knowing he bore part of the responsibility. Michelle's clinic faced its own crisis as the scandal expanded. Their connection to the Warburton name, once a source of funding, now threatened their ability to serve the community. Insurance companies hesitated to process claims. Medical suppliers demanded payment in advance. Staff worried about their jobs as resources dwindled. The impact on the children was immediate and severe. Haley's trust fund, meant to secure her future, was seized by investigators. The twins faced ostracism at school as classmates' parents, fearful of association with the scandal, discouraged friendships. Their sense of security, already fragile, suffered another devastating blow. Dr. Stevens watched the community he'd served for years struggle with the fallout. Patients who'd received care through Warburton-funded programs now faced uncertainty about their treatment. The clinic's financial stability, always precarious, became critical as donations dried up and operating costs mounted. Kimberly's final act of desperation came as federal agents closed in. She attempted to transfer millions to offshore accounts, trying to preserve some fragment of the family's wealth. The move backfired spectacularly, triggering additional investigations and freezing what remaining assets the family possessed. The scandal's reach extended to educational institutions, charitable foundations, and research facilities that had benefited from Warburton largesse. Grants were suspended, programs shut down. The ripple effects touched thousands of lives, from scholarship students to medical researchers to community service organizations. Keith's sobriety faced its greatest test as he watched his family's legacy crumble. The pressure to maintain appearances while dealing with investigators, lawyers, and the press pushed him to the brink. Only the thought of his children kept him from succumbing to the temptation of escape through alcohol. Michelle found herself becoming the family's emotional anchor, a role that threatened to overwhelm her. She balanced supporting Keith through his crisis, protecting the children from the worst of the fallout, and fighting to keep the clinic operational. The strain showed in sleepless nights and missed meals, worrying those who cared about her. The Southside community, already struggling with limited resources, rallied once again. Local businesses offered space for clinic operations. Volunteers helped with administrative tasks. Families shared resources, ensuring no one went without essential care. Their unity in crisis demonstrated the true meaning of community support. Haley's adjustment to her new reality proved particularly challenging. Too young to understand the complexities of the situation, she still sensed the anxiety around her. Her questions became more difficult to answer. Why did they have to move? Why were people angry at her family? Would they have to leave Chicago like her grandmother had? The twins developed a protective circle around their half-sister, their own troubles temporarily set aside in favor of shielding her from harsh realities. Their instinctive care for Haley provided a bright spot in the darkness, showing that family bonds could transcend the chaos of adult mistakes. Keith's journey from privilege to humility reached its nadir when he had to sell his father's watch to help fund the clinic's payroll. The moment marked both an ending and a beginning, the final surrender of his old life, and the first step toward building something more meaningful from the ashes of the Warburton Empire. The discovery that changed everything came not from federal investigators or corporate whistleblowers, but from Rosa Martinez's failing memory. The elderly shopkeeper had been cleaning her store's basement when she remembered something Victoria had entrusted to her years ago, a locked metal box, hidden behind a loose brick in the old foundation wall. Inside the box, Victoria's meticulous organization was evident. Files were arranged chronologically, each document carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. The earliest dated back 30 years, to Kimberly's first marriage, not to Charles Warburton, as everyone believed, but to a young doctor who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances weeks before the planned wedding to Kimberly. The documents revealed a pattern of deception spanning decades. Kimberly's first fiancé had discovered irregularities in hospital records, patterns of experimental treatments performed without proper consent. His investigation had brought him too close to truth, and his accident had been carefully orchestrated to look like a suicide. Charles Warburton's own papers told a different story than the one Kimberly had crafted. Far from being the willing architect of the family's medical empire, he had been trapped in an elaborate web of blackmail and manipulation. His alcoholism, which Kimberly had always portrayed as a moral failing, had been deliberately encouraged to keep him compliant. Keith's adoption papers revealed another layer of deception. He hadn't been chosen from an elite private adoption agency as Kimberly had claimed. He was the son of one of the hospital's victims, a young mother who had died during an unauthorized experimental procedure. Kimberly had arranged the adoption to silence the family's questions about their daughter's death. But Victoria's own investigation had uncovered a network of offshore accounts, shell companies, and hidden assets that dwarfed the known Warburton fortune. Money from fraudulent medical procedures had been laundered through charitable foundations, research grants had been diverted to private accounts, and government funding had been systematically misappropriated. The most damning evidence concerned Claire Stevens' death. Victoria had assembled surveillance photos, witness statements, and maintenance records proving the car crash had been meticulously planned. Claire had discovered proof of medical experimentation on children in Warburton hospitals, and her elimination had been deemed necessary to protect the family's interests. Dr. Stevens' hands shook as he read the file about his wife's murder. The technical details of how her car had been tampered with, the careful planning to ensure she would be alone on that stretch of road, the subsequent cover-up, everything was documented with cold precision. Even the identity of the mechanic who had sabotaged her brakes was included. Michelle found documents relating to her own persecution. The false medical reports, the coordinated harassment, the systematic destruction of her professional reputation, all had been orchestrated not just by Kimberly, but by a network of complicit medical professionals who had profited from maintaining the Warburton family's power. Keith discovered letters from his father that had never been delivered, attempts to warn him about his mother's true nature, apologies for not being strong enough to protect him, explanations for the drinking that had seemed like weakness but had actually been a desperate attempt to cope with overwhelming guilt. The documents also revealed the extent of Kimberly's monitoring of the twins. From the moment she'd learned of Michelle's pregnancy, she had maintained surveillance, gathered information, and planned for the eventual incorporation of the boys into her twisted vision of the Warburton legacy. The kidnapping attempt had been merely the latest in a series of planned interventions. Victoria's final letter, found at the bottom of the box, laid out her master plan. She had known her illness was terminal long before telling anyone, using her remaining time to gather evidence and establish a network of allies who would ensure justice was served even after her death. Her sacrifice had been deliberate, designed to give her testimony maximum impact. The federal investigators who received copies of Victoria's files found themselves with an airtight case. The evidence was comprehensive, meticulously organized and independently verifiable. Bank records matched witness statements. Medical files confirmed patterns of abuse. Electronic surveillance data corroborated timeline reconstructions. The Southside community, which had protected its own for so long, finally understood the true scope of what they had been fighting against. Their instinctive resistance to Warburton influence had protected them from becoming entangled in a web of corruption that had ensnared much of Chicago's medical establishment. The story broke simultaneously across all major Chicago news outlets on a cold Monday morning. Warburton Dynasty Decades of Deception Exposed screamed the Tribune's headline, while local television stations interrupted regular programming for breaking news. Victoria's carefully assembled evidence had been released with precision timing, ensuring maximum impact. The Chicago Sun-Times dedicated an entire section to untangling the web of corruption. Patient testimonies filled pages, their stories of unnecessary procedures and experimental treatments finally given voice. Former employees spoke about years of intimidation and coerced silence. Medical records revealed patterns of abuse that shocked even hardened investigators. Dr. Stevens found himself at the center of media attention as Claire's murder case was reopened. Television cameras crowded outside his clinic as he made his first public statement. "My wife died trying to protect vulnerable patients from a system that valued profit over human life." Today, her sacrifice finally means something. The quiet dignity of his words resonated across social media platforms. Michelle's story became a symbol of resilience against corporate power. Her journey from privileged wife to single mother, her struggle to protect her children while building a community clinic, and her unwavering commitment to ethical medical practice captured public imagination. Interview requests flooded in, but she remained focused on her patients and family. Keith chose to face the public exposure head-on. In a televised interview that would later win multiple journalism awards, he detailed his own complicity in his mother's schemes, his failure to protect Michelle, and his determination to make amends. His raw honesty about his alcoholism and recovery resonated with viewers, humanizing the corporate scandal. The Southside community emerged as heroes in the media narrative. Stories of their unified resistance to Warburton influence, their protection of Michelle and the twins, and their commitment to accessible healthcare provided a counterpoint to the corruption of the city's elite. Local residents found themselves being interviewed by national news organizations. Professional medical associations scrambled to distance themselves from the Warburton name. Hospitals rushed to review patient records and revise procedures. Research institutions launched internal investigations. The ripple effects reached far beyond Chicago, triggering similar investigations at medical facilities across the country. Kimberly's carefully constructed public image crumbled under the weight of evidence. Security camera footage of her confrontation at the clinic went viral. Former society friends gave interviews about her manipulative behavior. Even her carefully curated philanthropic work was revealed as a front for money laundering and tax evasion. The twins faced their own challenges as their story became public. School administrators worked to protect them from media attention, but social media buzzed with speculation about their future role in the Warburton legacy. Their classmates' parents, who had once shunned them, now sought connections, creating new tensions to navigate. Victoria's role in exposing the truth earned her posthumous recognition as a whistleblower. Her methodical gathering of evidence, protection of witnesses, and strategic release of information was praised by legal experts. Haley watched her mother's face appear on television screens, too young to fully understand her parents' legacy but sensing its importance. The clinic became a symbol of community resistance to corporate healthcare. Donations poured in from unexpected sources, former patients, reformed medical professionals, even competing hospitals seeking to distance themselves from the scandal. The financial crisis that had threatened its existence transformed into an opportunity for expansion. Dr. Stevens used the media attention to advocate for stricter oversight of medical research and stronger protections for whistleblowers. His testimony before state medical boards, combined with Claire's documented evidence, led to immediate reforms in hospital administration and research protocols. Michelle found strength in finally being able to tell her complete story. In carefully chosen interviews, she emphasized the importance of community support and ethical medical practice. Her advocacy for accessible healthcare resonated with national audiences, turning her local clinic into a model for community-based medical services. Keith's public acknowledgement of his failures, combined with his commitment to making amends, gradually shifted public perception. Rather than being seen as just another corrupt executive, he became an example of redemption and responsibility. His decision to use his remaining resources to support community healthcare initiatives earned cautious respect. The media exposure reached its peak when national news magazines ran feature stories about the intersection of corporate power and medical ethics, using the Warburton scandal as a central case study. The coverage sparked a national conversation about healthcare access, medical ethics, and the role of community in protecting vulnerable populations. As the public scandal unfolded, private revelations reshaped the relationships at the heart of the story. Keith found himself sitting in Dr. Stevens' office long after clinic hours, facing the man whose wife had died, trying to expose the truth. The conversation they'd both avoided for months finally happened, raw and honest in the quiet evening. "I should have known," Keith admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "The signs were there in the board reports, in the financial statements, in my father's drinking. I chose not to see them, doctor." Stevens listened silently, his own grief and anger tempered by years of helping others navigate trauma. Michelle discovered her own truths in unexpected moments. Watching Keith with the twins, she saw glimpses of the man she'd fallen in love with emerging from behind years of controlled facade. The way he listened to their stories, his genuine interest in their lives, his clumsy but sincere attempts to connect it sparked feelings she'd thought long buried. The twins began asking questions about their heritage, trying to understand the complexity of their identity. "Are we bad because we're Warburtons?" Carl asked one evening, his young face serious. Oliver added quietly, "Do we have to choose between being your sons and being his?" And their confusion broke both parents' hearts. Haley's innocent perspective often cut through adult pretenses. During a family dinner, she announced, "Daddy smiles more now when he's with us than he did in the big house." Her observation highlighted how the loss of wealth had paradoxically enriched their emotional lives. Dr. Stevens confronted his own unresolved feelings about Claire's death. Reading her research notes, seeing the problems she'd identified still affecting patients years later, he realized that his dedication to the clinic wasn't just about helping others, it was about continuing her work, fighting the battles she died trying to win. Keith's journey towards sobriety gained new meaning as he understood the parallels with his father. Charles Warburton's letters revealed a man trapped between conscience and cowardice, using alcohol to numb the guilt of enabling corruption. Keith recognized the same pattern in himself, but chose a different path, facing his failures sober, no matter how painful. Michelle found herself re-evaluating her role in the community. The clinic had been her sanctuary, her way of proving her worth beyond the Warburton name. Now, as donations flowed in and expansion became possible, she struggled with the responsibility of growing while maintaining the personal connection that made the clinic special. The revelation of Keith's adoption brought unexpected peace to the twins. Knowing their father wasn't biologically a Warburton somehow freed them from the weight of dynasty. They began asking about their actual biological grandparents, leading to the discovery of Keith's birth mother's family, working-class people who welcomed them without reservation. Haley's relationship with Michelle evolved naturally, without forcing labels or expectations. They bonded over simple things: baking cookies, reading stories, sharing quiet moments. Victoria's detailed letters and videos helped Haley understand that having Michelle in her life didn't diminish her connection to her mother's memory. Dr. Stevens finally allowed himself to imagine a future beyond grief and duty. Watching Michelle with the children, Seeing her strength and compassion, he recognized that honoring Claire's memory didn't mean living forever in the shadow of loss. Their friendship began shifting slowly, organically towards something deeper. Keith's redemption came not through grand gestures but through consistent presence. He attended school events, helped with homework, learned his children's friends' names. Each small act of ordinary parenting helped heal the extraordinary breach of trust his absence had created. The Southside community, which had protected Michelle and the twins during their darkest days, adjusted to their evolving family dynamic. They watched with cautious approval as Keith proved himself through actions rather than words as doctor. Stephen's relationship with Michelle deepened as the children found stability in their expanded family circle. The final personal truth emerged during a quiet evening at the clinic as Michelle and Keith worked together organizing patient files. "I forgave you," she said suddenly, surprising them both. "Not for you, but for me, for our children, for the chance to build something new from all this wreckage." Her words marked the beginning of a different kind of relationship, not romantic reconciliation, but genuine cooperation in parenting their children. The healing of deep wounds happened gradually, marked by small moments of trust and understanding. Family dinners became weekly events, with Dr. Stevens and Haley as regular participants. The twins started calling Keith Dad without self-consciousness. Michelle and Keith learned to co-parent effectively, their shared love for their children bridging past hurts. 1 year after the Warburton scandal broke, the Southside Clinic hosted a community celebration. The newly expanded building, funded by a combination of settlement money and community donations, stood as a testament to transformation. The sign above the entrance read the Victoria Stevens Memorial Health Center, honoring both women who had fought to expose the truth. The legal resolution came swiftly and definitively. Kimberly Warburton pleaded guilty to multiple charges of fraud, conspiracy, and financial crimes. The plea deal included full restitution to victims of medical malpractice, ensuring that families who had suffered under Warburton hospital practices would receive compensation. Keith's cooperation with federal investigators helped expose the full extent of corporate corruption. His testimony, combined with Victoria's evidence, led to the conviction of several board members and medical administrators. The Warburton empire was systematically dismantled, its assets redistributed to benefit the communities it had exploited. The clinic's transformation became a model for community healthcare. New programs focused on preventive care and health education. The staff expanded to include specialists who shared Michelle's commitment to accessible medical care. Dr. Stevens' expertise attracted young doctors eager to learn ethical medical practice. Family reconciliation happened gradually but meaningfully. The twins spent weekends with Keith, who had moved to a modest apartment near their school. They developed new traditions: Sunday morning pancakes, afternoon soccer games, homework sessions that often included Haley. Their relationship with their father grew stronger through these simple, consistent interactions. Michelle and Dr. Stevens married in a small ceremony in the clinic's community garden. The twins served as best men, Haley as flower girl, and Keith gave a heartfelt toast celebrating their union. The Southside community turned out in force, transforming the medical facility into a place of joy and new beginnings. The settlement money was largely dedicated to establishing a foundation supporting ethical medical research and community healthcare initiatives. Keith insisted that the foundation be governed by a board including community representatives, ensuring that decisions would benefit those most in need of care. Haley thrived under the love of her expanded family. Weekly dinners became a cherished tradition, with Keith, Michelle, Dr. Stevens, and all 3 children sharing stories and plans. Victoria's video messages and letters remained an important part of Haley's life, helping her understand her mother's role in creating this new family dynamic. The twins' academic achievements reflected their growing stability. Carl's interest in medicine and Oliver's talent for organization suggested they might someday continue their parents' work in community healthcare, but without the pressure of dynasty that had burdened previous generations. The Southside community's role in protecting Michelle and the children became part of local legend. Annual celebrations marked the anniversary of the clinic's founding, with neighborhood residents sharing stories of resistance and solidarity. Their unity had not only preserved the clinic but transformed it into something greater. Dr. Stevens found peace in continuing both Claire's and Victoria's legacies through the clinic's work. The medical ethics training program he established became nationally recognized, attracting healthcare professionals committed to reforming systematic abuses in medical care. Keith's journey from corporate heir to community advocate completed his redemption. His business experience, now focused on ethical healthcare management, helped ensure the clinic's sustainability. His children witnessed his transformation from absent father to dedicated parent and community member. Michelle's leadership of the expanded clinic earned recognition from medical associations and community organizations. Her approach to healthcare, combining professional excellence with genuine compassion, became a blueprint for other communities seeking to establish their own medical centers. The final piece of resolution came when the Warburton Mansion was converted into a medical training facility, its ornate rooms now hosting classes for healthcare workers serving underprivileged communities. The transformation of this symbol of power into a force for positive change marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. With legal battles settled and new foundations established, the focus shifted to building a future that honored the sacrifices of those who had fought for truth, while creating opportunities for the next generation to thrive. The transformation of the central characters became evident in small, meaningful moments rather than grand gestures. Keith's 2-year sobriety chip celebration took place in the clinic's community room, surrounded by family and friends who had witnessed his journey from corporate automaton to engaged father and community member. His hands no longer shook when he held his coffee cup, and his laughter came easily, without the edge of tension that had once characterized every interaction. Michelle discovered new depths to her strength as she balanced running the expanded clinic with her roles as wife, mother, and community leader. The woman who had once fought just to survive now taught other healthcare professionals about building ethical medical practices. Her presentations at medical conferences often featured the Southside Clinic as a model of community-based care, her quiet confidence inspiring others to challenge traditional healthcare paradigms. Dr. Stevens' healing manifested in his ability to share stories about Claire with his new family. The painful memories transformed into lessons about courage and conviction, helping the children understand the importance of standing up for what's right. His love for Michelle grew from this shared understanding of loss and renewal, creating a partnership strengthened by their individual journeys through grief to joy. The twins' growth showed in their increasing comfort with their complex identity. Carl's interest in medicine led him to volunteer at the clinic after school, learning from both his mother and stepfather about ethical healthcare practices. Oliver's natural leadership abilities emerged as he organized student initiatives, using his Warburton determination for positive community change. Haley blossomed under the love of her blended family. She spoke of having 2 mothers, Victoria through her letters and videos, and Michelle through daily care and affection. Her understanding of family expanded beyond traditional boundaries, embracing the strength that comes from choosing to love despite past hurts. Keith's relationship with his children evolved into something neither he nor Michelle had dared hope for during their darkest days. He learned to listen without trying to fix everything, to support without controlling, to love without conditions. The weekly father-child dinners became a time of genuine connection rather than obligatory visits. The marriage of Michelle and Dr. Stevens brought unexpected healing to everyone involved. Their wedding photos showed not just a bride and groom, but a community celebrating the power of second chances. Keith's sincere toast to their happiness marked how far they had all come from the days of Warburton control and manipulation. The clinic staff witnessed Michelle's growth from a determined survivor to a confident leader who never lost touch with the personal aspects of patient care. She maintained her practice of knowing every patient's name, even as the clinic expanded, setting an example of combining professional excellence with genuine compassion. Dr. Stevens found himself becoming the father figure he had once hoped to be with Claire. The easy affection between him and the twins developed naturally, built on shared experiences and mutual respect rather than obligation. His relationship with Haley helped heal both their losses, creating new memories while honoring Victoria's memory. Keith's professional transformation surprised even him. Using his business acumen to support ethical healthcare initiatives, he found purpose in helping other communities establish their own medical centers. His expertise, once used to maximize profits, now served to make healthcare more accessible to those in need. The children's academic achievements reflected their emotional growth. The twins' grades improved as they found stability in their expanded family circle. Haley's artistic talents flourished, her paintings often depicting scenes of family life that included all the adults who loved her. Michelle's forgiveness of Keith became complete through their shared commitment to their children's well-being. Co-parenting evolved from careful negotiation to natural cooperation, their past relationship providing context rather than conflict for their current roles in each other's lives. Dr. Stevens' clinic leadership style reflected his personal growth, combining Claire's passion for ethics with Victoria's strategic thinking and his own experience with loss and redemption. The medical ethics program he developed incorporated real-world examples of choosing right over expedient, helping new doctors understand the human cost of corporate healthcare. The South Side community watched this growth with pride, having protected these relationships through their most vulnerable moments. Their own evolution from protective circle to engaged partners in the clinic's mission demonstrated how personal growth ripples outward to affect entire communities. The transformation of the Warburton legacy from symbol of power to force for positive change marked the deepest growth of all. The name, once associated with corruption and control, began to represent community service and ethical healthcare, proving that even the darkest family histories can be redeemed through conscious choice and consistent action. The Victoria Stevens Memorial Health Center's 5th anniversary celebration became the perfect moment to reflect on the journey that had transformed not just a family, but an entire community's understanding of power, justice, and healing. The autumn evening found the clinic's community room filled with people whose lives had intersected in ways none could have predicted years ago. Michelle stood at the podium, her quiet confidence a testament to how far she had come from the young nurse driven from the Warburton mansion. True strength, she told the gathered crowd, isn't found in wealth or power. It's found in the courage to stand up for what's right, in the willingness to help others, and in the ability to forgive without forgetting the lessons learned. Keith sat in the audience, surrounded by his children, his sobriety coin turning between his fingers as he listened. His own journey from privileged heir to community advocate had taught him that redemption isn't granted, it's earned through consistent actions and genuine change. The proud looks his children gave him meant more than all his former wealth. Dr. Stevens, standing beside Michelle, added his perspective on healing and justice. Claire and Victoria showed us that truth will always find its way to light, he said, his voice steady. But it's what we do with that truth that matters. Do we use it to punish, or do we use it to build something better? The twins, now teenagers, shared their own message about identity and legacy. Carl spoke about choosing your own path, while Oliver reflected on the strength found in community. Their words demonstrated how they had transformed their Warburton heritage from a burden into a tool for positive change. Little Haley's contribution came in the form of a painting she had created for the clinic's walls, a colorful depiction of hands joined in a circle, representing the unity of family and community that had emerged from the ashes of the Warburton Empire. Her art captured the essence of their story, that love and support can create something beautiful from broken pieces. The Southside community leaders spoke about the power of standing together against injustice. Rosa Martinez, her hair now completely white, reminded everyone how the neighborhood had protected its own, during the darkest days. We showed that money isn't the only power, she declared. Sometimes the strongest power is simply refusing to let others be hurt. The clinic's success had proven that ethical healthcare could be both accessible and sustainable. The medical ethics program, now nationally recognized, trained new generations of doctors to prioritize patient care over profit. Every graduate carried forward the lessons learned from the Warburton scandal and its aftermath. The foundation established with the settlement money had funded similar community health centers across the country. Each new clinic represented a victory over the corporate greed that had characterized the old Warburton approach to healthcare. The ripple effects of their story continued to spread, inspiring other communities to stand up for their rights. Keith's message focused on the possibility of change. We all have choices, he told the gathering. Every day we can choose to perpetuate old patterns or create new ones. Real power lies not in controlling others, but in controlling our own actions and their impact on the world. Michelle and Dr. Stevens' marriage demonstrated how love could flourish in unexpected places, growing stronger through shared purpose and mutual respect. Their blended family showed that bonds formed by choice could be as strong as those formed by blood, perhaps even stronger. The final message emerged not from any single speech, but from the collective evidence of their transformed lives. The clinic's walls, once bare and clinical, now displayed photographs documenting their journey, moments of protest and protection, celebration and success, family and community, all intertwined. Victoria's legacy lived on in more than just the clinic's name. Her careful documentation of corruption had led to systemic changes in hospital administration and medical research. Her love for Haley had helped create a family structure where past hurts could heal and new bonds could form. The children's success in school and life demonstrated that breaking toxic family patterns was possible. The twins' academic achievements and community involvement showed how the determination that had once built the Warburton Empire could be redirected toward positive goals. Haley's artistic talents and emotional intelligence proved that children could thrive in unconventional family structures built on love and honesty. The evening ended with a community dinner, tables spread with food contributed by local families, the conversation flowing freely between former adversaries now united in common purpose. But the scene embodied their core message that true healing comes not from forgetting the past, but from using its lessons to build a better future. Dear valued viewers, if this story has touched your heart or resonated with your own experiences, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective and insights can help create meaningful discussions and connections within our community. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support our team as we continue to bring you more compelling stories that explore the depths of human resilience, love, and redemption. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new content. Please share this video with your friends and family if you believe they would find value in this story of transformation and healing. Every share helps us reach more people with messages of hope and understanding. If you enjoyed this story, a simple like would mean the world to us and help others discover this content. Together we can build a community that celebrates the power of forgiveness, second chances, and the strength of the human spirit.